Because we don't see it, but you don't know how they counted things. If you count in, depending on whether or not they counted the same disasters in the two periods, because we have biology. Now, Nick, from where he got the 46%, I remember digging into this a little bit. I didn't, then you get into a sort of, unending argument, the Lancet, which I wasn't prepared to do. From where they got this 46%, I cannot tell, because we don't see it, but you don't know how they counted things. If you count in, depending on whether or not they counted the same disasters in the two periods, because we have biological, we have technological, we have a whole bunch of other stuff. And I don't know.
I think he was referring to weather-related disasters.
Only weather-related, you think? I see.
Because that was what the report was about: climate change and health.
You looked into it at that time. Did you?
Yes, I did. As far as I remember, I could detect that they had chosen 2 points on the curve that were. If you chose those two coordinates, you would get an increase of that kind. But
if you choose something else, it would have been different.
It would have been 0 or less anyway. So that's as far as I recall.
I still, okay, apart from, I cannot give you a exact answer of how he calculated, and also, as you rightly say, if you move it's a very unstable way of doing it, because if you move those points around, your answer is completely different. And so there is no robustness in that kind of comparison. But be that as it may, it's also true that even today, Anders, we have people quoting us saying that as the MDAP database shows, the number of disasters are increasing in an alarming way. It's not increasing in an alarming way. It's really.
So where do they get that from?
I think it's wishful thinking. It's wishful thinking in the sense, I think that the climate movement needs to have, as though there's not enough problems with the climate in the world. We have a lot of problems with the climate, but I think it makes it difficult for the climate disaster movement to be able to say that, hey, look, the number of disasters at this time is not increasing. It does not mean that there is no problem with the climate change. There is still a very big problem with the climate change. But the number of disastrous events are not increasing. Maybe the number of affected people are increasing, but it really needs to be looked into. But I think there is a reluctance, because it's an easy statistic. Climate disasters are increasing.
Yeah,
it's an easy slogan. And we do a press conference every year. And in the last 2 years, we've said a press conference, we've said, there's not been an increase, and this has been a very good year, things like that. And nobody wants good news, Anders.
I know. That's the problem.
They wanted me to debate some climate scientists, and they couldn't find anyone. Whenever
nobody wanted to debate against you.
No, they just don't want to debate thing. They just said, yes, I would like to come there. Then when they heard that this guy is going to be on the other side, they just refused to. And well, I think I understand why, because the mainstream narrative is that the climate skeptics are just the crazy deniers. But if you really debate one, and you can hear that they have sort of reasonable arguments, so it's a it's a situation when the mainstream cannot win, because either you give the skeptics some equal treatment, so you treat them as equals and you debate them, and then you validate their narrative, or and then you either agree with the skeptic, by which you are getting compromised in your community, or you just are defeated by the skeptic because he points to some little problems that the mainstream has, and then you lose too, so they don't want to debate anyone.
Okay,
And
but
it's
so
also part.
in a way, you're saying that they know that they're actually not quite right here, and that's why they don't want to debate it. Or I mean, that's a bit harsh to say, really, but is it like that?
Well, there are two things. Like, there is this journalistic or activist narrative which claims that climate change is real and only deniers deny that. And this is crazy idea. It's very easy to disprove. We don't deny climate change. We have never denied that. And so this is not what the debate is about. And it's easy to win against these people, okay? And another thing is that we criticize the IPCC, some of the malpractice by some of the scientists. And this really sometimes happens. Scientists are also human, so you can always point out to some mistakes or fraud that they have done. And then again, you cannot really just defeat the skeptic and claim that they are just crazy, because they are wrong on something, or they are right on other things. And this is just like another debate. But they want to frame it as reason versus crazy denier cranks. And you cannot allow any debate, because in a debate, when you really face the people, so this narrative will just fall apart.
Yeah, because I mean, a true debate, an honest debate isn't really about winning or losing, is it? I mean, it's about learning things, in my worldview anyway.
Yeah,
from the other side, and growing together, if you want to be a bit philosophical about it.
Yeah, the point is that most of the things between the alarmists and skeptics are quite complementary. That just doesn't mean that if skeptics are right on something, that doesn't mean that the alarmists are not right on anything. You could come to some sort of consensus, but that is not desirable either.
Traveling above the ground has quite simply been a human dream since Leonardo da Vinci. And it's not hard to understand why. Mother Earth's surface is limited. Not only humans are in the way, but also a great amount of nature, and these days also quite a lot of infrastructure. Even so, a growing number of people with a basically benevolent and sound engagement to protect coming generations from a feared climate disaster have become obsessed with the emissions from aviation, and they are now adamant that we need to disregard 120 years of development. Aviation must be scrapped and substituted by rail traffic, they say. Often as simple as that. The debate doesn't encourage thinking multiple thoughts at the same time. Is the problem with flying really so acute that we have to stop? And will trains be able to replace planes as the engines of global integration? My answer to both of those questions is no, and I'll explain why.
But now we had this smoking gun that showed us that something big had gone on there right at the tail end of the last ice age, at the tail end of this mini ice age that had been tagged on to the end of the big ice age, which we call the Younger Dryas.
Yeah.
And what I'd suggested is that the Younger Dryas was involved with some kind of cataclysm, something that involved an object coming out of the sky and devastating parts of the northern hemisphere, and leaving as a legacy some kind of memory of this event that may well have triggered a lot of sudden spurts of human activity, not just in the area of southeast Anatolia, where Göbekli Tepe is placed, but in other parts of the world, and in myths of legends, of course. I mean, there are thousands of myths and legends around the world that talk about some kind of catastrophe that reflected both a element coming from the sky, fire falling out of the sky, but also obviously a humongous flood that, you know, covered large areas, destroyed people, and left alive only a few survivors. I mean, obviously, most obvious one being that of Noah and the Great Flood of the Bible. But of course, this is just one of hundreds of similar stories around the world. So that was it, really. And once Göbekli Tepe was on the map, then that became my priority from that point onwards. I was lucky enough to visit it in 2004. The people that created Göbekli Tepe still had a very strong memory of this cataclysm, which is now pretty well established to have occurred initially around 10,800 BC and to involve a fragmentation of a comet that came into the atmosphere and peppered the northern hemisphere, creating huge devastation, possibly destroying up to 75% of the population in North America alone, but also reaching very close to Göbekli Tepe itself. There is a site on the Euphrates called Abu Horoya. It's in modern-day Syria, although today it's beneath the waters of a dam, a reservoir of a dam. And the archaeologists there discovered not only artifacts going back 11 to 12,000 years and more, but they also found a layer of melted glass and other types of what they call scoric debris, which could only have been created by something of extreme high temperature. And we're talking, 2,500 degrees centigrade. Now, the only thing that can cause this on Earth is lightning. But if it's lightning, it's a very small area, but this was over an extensive area and strongly has suggested to climatologists, to geologists and many other types of disciplines that we are dealing with some kind of, obviously a comet impact, but some kind of airborne blast of fire, which is quite characteristic of what would happen with an incoming fragment of a comet. And this was found all over the Northern Hemisphere. Also, there is a layer of thick black ash that's been found in various continents around the world that all dates to about 10,800 BC. In Europe, it's called the Usilu Horizon. In America, it's called the Black Mat. And it contains cosmic debris of catastrophe, and it's very similar around the world, and it tells us that this catastrophe almost certainly did occur.
Once you realize that our DNA is not an evolved DNA, that there's a big problem with the DNA, and then you put that in context with all the ancient civilizations that talk about, maybe not all, but many ancient civilizations that talk about humanity being created by the gods, and it's over and over and over again. And then you see the venomous, non-stop attack by mainstream education and mainstream media that's all lies, and it's just imagination of people in old times, because people in old times were stupid. They didn't know what
legends, myths.
Exactly. And they turn them into legends and myths. Now, keep in mind that, for example, the Roman Church, let's talk about the Romans, because I think some people will probably be able to realize what's going on here. So in the Roman Empire, we have a very good example how we go from mythology to history in one single step. Now, in Rome, they had the gods. They had the pantheon of Roman gods, which were the same pantheon as the Greek gods, the same pantheon as the Sumerian gods, same pantheon as all the gods in Norse mythology. It's always the same group of gods. They just have different names. But they generally are the same ancient, very powerful beings that came from the sky, that controlled humanity, controlled the world. They had the power of flight. They had the power of special technology and laser beams and whatever. In Hindu mythology, it's unbelievable, or Hindu religion, not mythology. And then in Rome, so we've got these 12 gods, and it's the Roman Church. The Roman Church and the 12 gods that prayed to the gods, that feared the gods, that had a physical relationship with the gods for several hundred years, and prior to that, thousands of years, that then turned into the Roman gods. And then at one point, they cease to be the 12 Roman gods, and it's no longer the Roman Church, but it suddenly becomes the universal. So it becomes the Roman Catholic Church, and they no longer believe in the 12 gods, and now believe in the Holy Trinity. Just like this, from the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where Emperor Constantine suddenly put together what we know as the Bible today. And you realize that this is how quickly history can change. From mythology, the Roman gods, to reality and modern history, the Roman Catholic Church that controlled the world. That's just one very simple example. And very few people are even aware of this. So you've got to realize that humanity has been manipulated on every possible level for thousands and thousands of years. If you're at university and you write an exam and they ask you, what is the force that holds the nucleus of the atom together? And if you don't answer, the strong force is what holds the nucleus together, you will fail. So you'll fail physics and you will not get a degree, and you will not be able to have a successful career because you did not answer a predetermined answer, a predetermined question with a predetermined answer. Well, that answer is incorrect. That strong force does not exist. There is no thing as a strong force. It is a name that we created because we cannot understand how the nucleus of the atom is held together. So can you see where I'm going with this? Because really what becomes very clear from my discoveries is how little we know about the history of the world, the history of the human race, the history of what went on here for thousands. And I'm talking about not just thousands of years, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of years. So my discovery in South Africa of more than 10 million stone circle ruins that are all connected together with channels, and that again is connected together with terraces that cover entire mountains. It looks like a giant spider's web, holding all these stone circle ruins together, with no doors and entrances, one continuous structure that covers 450,000 square kilometers of southern Africa. Wow. We know that there is a vanished civilization that in none of our history books, nothing is known about who these people were, what they did, why they were here, what were they doing, how did they build this incredible structure. It's the largest engineering undertaking or construction effort probably in the history of the world, and yet nobody knows about it. And then you add to it the fact that these are not dwellings for people or animals, that these structures that I'm referring to is a machine. It's a giant machine that generates energy very simply by understanding the frequencies, how sound resonance frequencies work, how that is converted into magnetic fields, and that in turn creates electromagnetic fields. And I know this because we've measured it over and over again. It's not I think it is. We know it is scientifically. We've measured it different places. We know how much magnetic fields come out. We know what sound frequencies come out of the walls. We know how much electromagnetic fields come out of the walls.
How have you gone about measuring this? That's fascinating. How did you measure it?
Oh, they're very advanced devices, very advanced technological devices used by people, that install satellites and satellite telecommunication and measure frequencies, electromagnetic fields, voltage, all these things. I mean, the technology exists for us to measure it because we're actually using aspects of this ancient knowledge in our telecommunications and so forth. But the aspects that we are used so that they can be used to control people and not to benefit people.
And let me say, I don't doubt that the climate is warming. What I'm questioning, that every change associated with climate warming is negative. Living organisms have to be far from equilibrium to maintain their internal well-balanced state. What has been wrong and is still going wrong is to transfer this internal balance into the outer worlds, ecosystems as they are generally called. Ecosystems are not stable and haven't to be stable. They are the environment of organisms but no ecosystem, not a single one, has a central regulation, which is typical for an organism. No ecosystem has a natural boundary, which is basically for every organism, it is separated from the surrounding. Ecosystems are separated by research aspects, but they are not entities for themselves in nature. You can't see an ecosystem. You haven't certainly never seen an ecosystem pairing with another one and producing offsprings. This is obviously nonsense. But in nature conservation especially, and also in some parts of ecological science, ecosystems are treated like organisms. And this organism identity is a basic fault. It is wrong, deadly wrong. Ecosystems are always independent from the organisms which are living in, and the organisms have to be in imbalance with the ecosystems if they are to keep on working.
I'm very glad that this is happening, because so many observers have come forward and been ridiculed during the years.
Yeah.
And they are just telling what they saw. Mm-hmm. Of course, they don't know what they saw. Mm-hmm. But their stories, I mean, you must listen to them. You cannot just laugh at them. You must take them seriously, see if you can find an explanation, and treat them properly. And now this is really going to go in that direction, thanks to the politicians and what's happening in the US.
Did you think that that would happen in your lifetime?
No, really not. This is exciting.
Yeah.
This is the most exciting part of this story, really, that we now can discuss UFOs in a proper manner. I mean, UFOs are just unidentified flying objects. I want to know what lies behind that. And of course, many people would like to know that. So now we can discuss it.
Yeah. So what is it that these pilots have recorded, really?
It's very dramatic. You hear their voices, and they're wowing, and look at that thing, and it's rotating, and, well, they are really excited.
Dude, this is fucking drawn, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the SA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Look at that thing, dude.
So they see unknown, quite small objects, probably not more than a couple of meters, that are flying in very strange ways. And they are filming them with those infrared cameras that they have on board of those F-18 Hornets. And at one point, one of those objects leaves the screen very, very fast. And that is from an observation from 10 years ago, west of California, outside in the ocean, when the carrier USS Nimitz got radar returns that were very, very strange for several days. And at one point, they also met those objects in the sky. Okay. So one of the pilots, he saw one of those objects down just above the surface. And he later on called it the Tic Tac, shaped like a Tic Tac, as an oval, oblong thing. And this strange Tic Tac craft, it flew in a circular motion, and he was trying to fly after it. But suddenly it went away. And at that point, he was out of fuel. He and his wingman had to return to the carrier. And another pilot went after this. And the object suddenly appeared at a point where those pilots had a rendezvous point. So it knew where the American aircraft were heading. But at this point, the other pilot could film this object. And in the end of that film, you can see the object going away very fast.
Okay.
So they are very strange. And other pilots have said that they have seen those objects every day for several years.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. Thank you.